Now, when it comes to the mixing stage, what is it that we actually do? It seems like a simple question, but it's really not that straightforward. So let's dive right into it with this project over here. And as you can see, if I make this a little bit smaller, you can see that there's many different tracks in here, which are of course all of the individual sounds that this project is made from. And I've imported them and I've organized them and I've started my initial draft mix, which is just unmuting each individual track, determining its volume and then doing some preliminary effects. So as you can see, some of these channels already have effects on them, mainly bass lines and drums and more important stuff like big sequences. And what I've attempted to do with this draft mix is just set up an initial kind of template mix that I can start from. Just something where the volumes are roughly balanced and I have all of the main elements sounding the way that I want them to sound. And now this is where really the main core of the mixing kind of comes in. And that is taking all of the different elements within a project like this and all gluing them together into one track. Because at the end of the mixing project, what we want to end up with is one mix bus that is going to have all of our sounds summed, which we can then render out to go into the mastering phase. Now you can imagine that in practice what that means is that there's going to be a lot of listening involved. I'm both going to listen on my main monitors, I'm going to listen on my headphones, and I'm also going to listen on my Bluetooth speakers and all of that kind of stuff. Just getting as many different perspectives on how the track is actually sounding on different listening environments. And what that will allow me to do is it allows me to go back into the project and make small adjustments, make small changes depending on what I'm hearing. And I found that when you're doing these listening sessions, it is better to write things down like this on a small piece of paper, as opposed to having the DAW open and immediately diving into making changes, because that is really where you're kind of losing yourself in the bigger picture. Because you can imagine that you start playing the track and you're maybe just 10 seconds in, you hear the first problem. If you immediately dive into it, you're not really in the mindset of trying to find out everything that is wrong with the track. And it might be the case that you run in a situation like this. Say that we scroll down to the one shots where I have this track over here with a big bell on it. Now, if this being my project, I of course know basically exactly what the project is like. And I was mixing this sound in over here where it's playing, as you can see in the waveform here. But if I zoom out, you can see that it also plays right at the end of the track. And I kind of forgot about this up until the last second when I played back the track in its entirety, when I listened to the track as a whole. And I noticed that over here, one of the processes that I had was that big delay, and that was spilling into over where the outro is going to be. So what would essentially happen is that at the outro, the sound was still playing. And of course, then you're going to get an immediate stop where it's going to the next song. And so you generally want to fade out to silence, which of course with this delay, it wasn't doing. Like and subscription, please. You already subscribed? Okay. Well, then you can become a channel member if you want to. There's various awesome benefits if you become a channel member, like early access to videos, priority to feedback streams and stream replays, and also a separate section on my Discord server, as well as discounts for my other products. Right, sir, here's your ticket, drive safe, and have a very nice rest of the video. So to recap, this is the phase where I just listen and I absorb the kind of issues that I'm hearing with the track over different listening environments, and I'm just writing those down. And then of course, after that comes the session in which I actually implement the solutions to the problems that I found. But then there's also a little bit of an extra thing going, and that is that I like to experiment at this point a little bit with the mix. Usually this includes adding a little bit of saturation in places, maybe adding extra ear candy effects like slide phasers and slide choruses and that kind of stuff. And usually this is the part of the mixing phase which I like most. As you can imagine, I get to experiment a lot and I get to implement a lot of different tricks. I also come up with a lot of new ideas, and in general, it's just the most creative part of the mixing phase. But after this, there is the part where you actually have to finalize your track, and this is really where you start working towards the final product. And what this means is that after this phase of more experimentative kind of mixing, I would say, we're going to get much more analytical and we're going to dive much more into the actual details and just the track being technically right. And this is also where I start to do preparations for mastering, which usually just include getting an idea of the spectrum of all of the reference material that I'm using. For those that don't know, I don't have reference tracks in my actual project, even though I have a track for that already set up. This is usually more reserved for the production mix being here. But the way that I use reference material is going to my playlist. And you can see I have a massive playlist over here. And this actually has like 300 tracks, I would say. A little bit more. 320 tracks here. And I just find a couple that kind of fit the vibe that I'm going for and usually have the same key at least, but also usually the same BPM. Of course, it's going to depend a little bit on the material that you're working with. Sometimes you have a really easy time finding reference material for the track that you're working with. Sometimes it's a little bit harder. But I like to have a good different selection of tracks out of the playlist over here. And then, as I said, I use that as reference material, both as refreshing my ears while I'm actually in the mixing process, but also to do things like do a spectral check or do a loudness check on the reference material later on in the mixing phase when I'm really towards the end and I really need to just get the track finished. So in that finalizing stage, there's also a lot of information that I can get out of them, which I'm of course going to cover in a separate video because, as you can imagine, with still being in the draft mixes, I haven't arrived to this point yet. So I'll probably have to cover this towards the end of the month. Now for today, this is going to be everything that I want to talk about. I just kind of wanted to go through the process a little bit more broadly because I think everybody kind of globally understands what the mixing phase is supposed to be. You're going from a production, which is a whole bunch of different sounds, into kind of a final mix, which is going to be one track, which is going to have everything in there. And that means that everything has to be balanced against each other. But that sounds like a very massive task if you're just presented with doing just that. And if you don't know how you would go about this, then maybe this would be a nice framework to start off with, to see if this is a nice way of working for you. Of course, this is something that I've developed for myself, and this is the way that I like to do it, but it might not be right for you. Like maybe you need more time for revisions, maybe you need just a different setup, maybe you need a different DAW than I do. Of course, I really like the exporting and then re-importing into Reaper and mixing in there, but that means that I'm losing quite a bit of time actually exporting these things and of course resetting up the project and just getting the balance back and setting up all of the volumes. But of course, that might not be the workflow for you, as it can be quite a bit of a hassle to do that, especially for an album, as I've just recently discovered. Anyway, what is important is that you just find something that works for you, as I said, and I hope that this insight into my mixing process can also help you develop your own. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you did by leaving a like and make sure that you're subscribed. Another way to support the channel is from watching some more of my content, which you can of course do by checking the videos in the end cards, or just going to my channel and seeing what's on there. Anyway, I hope you find something cool to watch, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.